You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vetrehabbers, it's another one of my Behind the Vet Rehab Practice podcast this week. For those of you that are new to the veterinary rehabilitation podcast, these interviews are one of my favorite things to do. What I love about them is that Vetrehabbers share with us their wins and their losses. And although it's not great that they made mistakes, when they share them with us, we get to learn from them. So when we find ourselves in that same position, we have hindsight which we would never have had before. So you get to fast track your success by not repeating the same mistakes that they did. Here's a quick shout out to Gemma Coates from G Coates Animal Physio for this awesome review on Instagram. She said, "You're doing a seamless job. I love the podcast. They keep my head in the game, challenge my knowledge, and inspire me on my travels between clients." Gemma, if you're listening to this, I'd love to gift you a limited edition veterinary rehabilitation podcast mug. Please email me on meg@onlinepethealth.com and I'll send you your mug straight away. Thank you so much for the awesome review. I love hearing from all of you guys. So please, if you're listening to the podcast, no matter where you are, in the car, on a horse, however you listen, take a screenshot and a picture and tag us at Onlinepethealth. We want to hear from you. So in today's podcast, I speak to veterinary physiotherapist Roxy Hanson. Now, she has quite an unusual setup where she actually works full-time for an equine yard, working as one of the top South African show jumpers' personal veterinary physios. She manages the yard and also sees all the competitive livery horses on the side. It was great to get some insight into her day-to-day life as a vetrehabber, and I can really see how her setup might also work for the small animal vetrehabbers that work for a veterinary practice half day and in addition have their own clients either doing house visits or using a rented consult room. Before we head over to the interview, I want to remind you that February is Online Pet Health's birthday month, and together with Pulse Vet, we are gifting you access to this free webinar. It's called The Pressure to Perform, Choosing the Right Extracorporeal Shockwave Device, and it's lectured by Melissa King. So the webinar is today, the 23rd of February. If you're listening to this podcast on the day of release, you can access it on www.onlinepethealth.com/birthday. If you're listening to this after the 23rd, you can access the recording and you can head over to the same link, onlinepethealth.com/birthday. So over to my chat with Roxy. You guys are going to enjoy this one. Hey Roxy, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi Megs, thanks so much for having me.
Roxy, won't you tell us how you got into the field of veterinary rehabilitation?
So yeah, I've always had, particularly for horses, I've been riding my whole life. Honestly, I think it was having my own competition horses and knowing how much work went into keeping them sound and happy and performing at their best. And it's just something that I always was really passionate about, is just keeping the animals performing really well. So yeah, that's sort of, it spiraled from there, and I was very lucky to find equine librium and get accepted. And from there it was history, yeah.
So tell us about the studies at Equine Librium. If I recall, it's 4 years, right?
Correct, yeah, 4 years.
And do you do practical all 4 years, or is there like theory for a few years and then you go into practical? How does it work?
So our first 2 years are predominantly theory. You have your practical exams every year through the 4 years, but your first 2 years are heavily theory based, and then your third and fourth year become a lot more practical. Obviously in your first year you're covering stuff like anatomy, physiology, the general sciences, so that's a pretty academic year and it can get pretty tough. And then yeah, third and fourth year becomes really practical. So it's a really well-rounded course, and you see it with the students that are qualifying from there.
So for the listeners, Equine Librium is a veterinary physiotherapy college based in Plettenberg Bay in South Africa. And Roxy graduated there in 2019, right? Yeah. So tell us what happened after that, because I mean, 2019, was that December 2019 you graduated at the end of the year? Yeah, the worst time to graduate. What followed the next year? So tell us what happened after that.
Yeah, it wasn't great. So I went on my first treatment trip about a week after I qualified. I went up to KZN. I used to live in Zululand, which is really remote, and we always used to struggle getting therapists out there. So I was really excited to get in there and see some patients. So my first treatment trip, like a week after qualifying, was fantastic. And then lockdown hit. And then it was tough. Obviously we actually weren't allowed to practice for a long time. I was really, really blessed in that I was running a stable yard in Plate at the time as well. So I still had some kind of income and was still doing a bit of just keeping the clients' horses ticking over from like a work and physio point of view, but wasn't able to see any outside clients for a long time. And then obviously even after lockdown, so many people were in a really tough financial situation. And unfortunately, I think physio for your animals is somewhat of a luxury. So it's not something that people were really budgeting for. So it took a long time for everything to pick up again. And being in Plet, which is a really small area as well, was quite tough because I then wasn't able to travel to do my clients in KZN. So yeah, it took a knock, but it's improving a whole lot now. But that was a big part of the reason why I made the move to Johannesburg as well.
Yeah, you've got a job now at a stables, and we're going to go through all of that because I think it's really like it's something that other vet rehabbers might find themselves in this position where you're like employed, but then you're also doing some freelance work. So tell us how you got the job in Johannesburg.
So that was, it was really just by chance. A friend that I'd been to school with was in Plet on holiday and we had a coffee together. And she basically said to me that she had a friend in Joburg who was looking for a stable manager. Later found out that this was George Philippides, who's a very, very well-known show jumper in South Africa. And yeah, his yard, Alchemy, Stud and Equestrian Center is fantastic. So it was really quite like spur of the moment. And I came up a couple of weeks later to have the interview and then moved to Joburg about 3 weeks after that. And it's really just been the greatest move. My client base down here is fantastic. And I love the aspect of running the yard and having my physio clients there as well. It just gives a whole lot more like all round management aspect to these competition horses, which is amazing.
Yeah. So you obviously work for the yard, you run the yard, and then do you treat the owner's horses as part of the deal? And then you've got freelance, like then you freelance and do other clients. So let's talk about the primary job where you're actually working. I mean, how many hours does that entail and how many horses does that show jumper have that you have to treat?
Yeah, so basically my role as manager and in-house physio, I'm running the day-to-day of the yard. So the livery clients, he breeds as well. So managing the breeding side of things and then treating his personal competition horses. At the moment, he's got his stallion who's in the higher grades. And then we've got a string of young horses coming up. So there's about 6 horses that I'm treating for him. Then my Alchemy like livery clients get physio at a discounted rate. So they're done over and above my like stable and yard management duties. And then I freelance and see my own clients outside of the yard as well.
Okay. So do you get paid for the livery clients, or is that, so like, do you get paid, that money comes to you when there's a livery client that needs physio? Okay. And then how do you work that in with your time? So like, do you have certain times that you are working? I mean, because that like gets tricky. And I mean, I think it's the same when there is a veterinary nurse or somebody who's working at a veterinary practice and then is doing like vet rehab or vet physio on the side. It's the same thing. It starts to get tricky. Like, where do you fit these things in? It has to obviously work for the client. It has to work for you, and then also work for the person that you're employed with.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of juggling to be done. And, you know, my Alchemy clients will always get preference. So generally, like my day-to-day sort of routine is I do a lot of riding there as well. So it's working horses in the morning. From there, particularly if we've got shows coming up with George's personal horses or my Alchemy livery clients, they will always get preference over my outside clients. So then it's just kind of fitting them in around shows and lessons. But, you know, the nice thing is I'm there and it's, you know, I can get off a horse and start treating straight away. So I can get through my Alchemy clients really quite quickly. And then my outside, like personal business clients are then fit in around when my Alchemy horses are at shows. So there's a lot of juggling, and it can get fairly long hours. The nice thing about having my livery clients that I'm managing all the time is I see every aspect of those horses. So I'm watching them walk in and out of the stables in the morning. I'm watching them on the walker. I'm seeing them in lessons. I'm chatting to the owners all the time. So as opposed to like your general outside competition horses that you're seeing maybe once or twice a month, I'm watching these horses every single day. So as soon as we see something that doesn't look 100% right, we can get in there and manage it straight away. And the results have been so fantastic because we can just nip those little niggles before they become a big issue. So that's the really nice part. And you're involved then with the dietary side even, and you can just manage every aspect of what's going on with these horses, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, because I think as therapists, we want to be sort of, involved holistically, but sometimes it's tricky because, like you say, we are only there every now and again. And then you generally tend to have to talk to all the other therapists and stuff. So you're in a really advantaged point in that you can actually be at the stables, and when the farrier's there, you can have that conversation. And when the vet's there, you can have that conversation. So you really are getting that vet rehab team approach because you're getting that input from all of them, and have all that information right at your fingertips.
For sure, yeah. And it's shown as well, my relationship with the vets and the farriers is so great because I'm there all the time. So every time the farrier's there, we're discussing these tricky cases, and the vet comes out and I can tell them exactly how the horse has been for the last 3 weeks. And, maybe he had one bad day last week. So it becomes so hands-on and so all round. And I think then you really get the best results out of these horses.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the show jumper. Is his name George, did you say?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, for George, you must be such a huge asset because here he is, you're managing the livery stables and managing all the horses, but then also for the physio side to have a physio right there. And, I wonder for him, I mean, have you had a conversation with him about injuries and, how his horses have been since you've been working for them? I mean, has he had less injuries? Is there a big change that he's seen?
We've gone through a bit of turnover with horses. It just the way it happened. He'd actually sort of sold 2 of his best horses just as I was starting. But a really nice example is his stallion that we're competing. He's the most phenomenal horse with like all the ability in the world. But he needs to be feeling good. When he's feeling good, he fights for you, and that's amazing. So what's been really nice with him is he's always responded well to physio, but we found now, like, I have a little routine with him before he's worked in the mornings. He has his little core strengthening session. He's on a stretching program. He's on a core strength program, and then he gets physioed. I don't actually do necessarily that often a full physio treatment, but it's the little bits of like strengthening work and stretching work in between that have just kept him in that sweet spot. And we've really seen a difference with him. He's just, his whole body is just feeling stronger and happier, and he's loving his work. So I think that's a nice part of it as well, is not just the physioing side, but the fact that I can have these horses on stretching programs and stuff like that. And it takes me 10 minutes in the mornings. I've got a couple of the livery clients' horses who maybe battle with their necks. Every morning I spend 5 minutes stretching them and making sure that they're just keeping nice and supple. It's sometimes difficult for owners to get all of that homework done if they're only getting to their horse like 2 or 3 times a week. So the fact that I can do it every morning has just shown such improvement in like specific problem areas for certain horses.
Yeah, I mean, I think owners always have the intention to do it, but like you say, it's just they just often don't have the time, and other things that with that minimum time they've got other priorities. Okay, awesome. Sure. So how many horses are there? So how many livery horses are at the stables?
So I've got 32 horses at the yard at the moment, but that's including George's horses and then a handful of brood mares and foals. So we're probably sitting with about 20 livery clients. Yeah.
Okay. So you keep busy.
Yeah, it's very full time, but no, I love every second of it.
That's awesome. So tell me now your freelance clients that you have when you have the time to do those, like how do they find you? Are you advertising or is it just word of mouth?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Had beautiful business cards designed that I've sort of gotten tax shops and stuff around Joburg. But for the most part, it has been word of mouth. Obviously having a name like Alchemy Stud and George Philippides behind me has been a huge help. And having all of these livery clients that are out competing. And then, yeah, I think the social media side is always a big thing with advertising. They're obviously then all tagging me in their show results. And that's a big part of where the business comes from, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And from George's side, like, I mean, how did it work when you came there? Did you have equipment or did he have all the equipment? So like, how did you work all those sides of the business?
Coming in, I had a TENS machine and a Faratic. George has since bought a Beamer, which we use on his horses. And if there's one of my own clients that really needs it, then, he's sort of happy for me to use it for them. There's a couple of other things that I would still like to invest in, but I think I'll more than likely invest sort of through my own business rather than expecting George to buy it. The risk then as well is if he owns the equipment and anything happens to it with one of my personal clients, I don't want to sort of have that burden on him. So yeah, there's a whole wish list of things that I'd still like to buy, but it's a work in progress. And I think the training that we get at Equilibrium, as much as I love the electrotherapy and all of those kind of things, and they definitely have their place, we're trained to use our hands, and I think that's where we're most effective in any case. So yeah, it's not urgent, but there's always lots of toys that you want to buy.
And I mean, are there plans for you to expand? I mean, have you ever thought about getting another therapist to sort of expand on the freelance side so you could still do some and sort of maintain your job that you have there and they could see any extra clients that you have?
So not as yet. I haven't been in Joburg very long. It's less than a year already. So the outside client base is still building. And I love having like that more personal relationship with my clients as well. So I haven't really thought as far as getting another therapist involved. I won't lie, there's days where I would love to have like an admin person. The paperwork involved and, filling out patient notes and stuff when you've got a full day can get hectic. So there's days where I would love to have a scribe, but so far, no, I think I'd like to try and keep it just me and my patients for the time being. I'd love to see it grow to the point that I could, but for the time being, I think we're happy as we are. Yeah.
And are you working 7 days a week at the moment, pretty much, or do you get a break?
So Sundays is downtime. I find that physically, actually, I need a bit of a break between the riding and the treating. By the end of the week, my body's exhausted. So Sundays I try and make sure that we have downtime, unless we've got weekend long shows. Then often I'll sort of just stay on board and just make sure that the horses are feeling good through the course of the show, but it's few and far between.
Yeah. And just thinking about the stables that you're at, I mean, is there any opportunity there maybe to get like an underwater treadmill or something like that? I mean, it sounds like it's a very competitive yard. Is there space and opportunities like that?
It is a very competitive yard. And George and I have, you've always got all these plans. It would be ideal if all of these amazing things weren't just so incredibly expensive. So the one thing that I would love to invest in at some stage is a spa. I think, for our competitive horses that are jumping regularly, I just think that the spas are amazing. We had a solarium as well, which was great. So yeah, I don't know about an underwater treadmill. I think maybe logistically it's just a bit difficult. Kailami, the properties are not huge. So a spa is first on the list for me, for sure.
And tell me, do you do anything besides horse riding in your spare time? Or do you have any other hobbies?
So I've actually gotten into shooting, which is
like with a gun. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
so my brother shoots competitively, and he took me once or twice, and it's super addictive. So yeah, another expensive hobby to add to the horses. I would never get into hunting, but yeah, target practice and stuff is a lot of fun. So that's
Yeah.
how I spend my weekends now.
So I think I've only ever shot a gun once, and it was do you know The Amazing Race?
Yes.
Yeah, that TV thing. That so we had this thing in Cape Town here called the Blazing Race, and so we had all these teams, and we were sort of doing like a day amazing race kind of thing. And one of the things we had to do is we got to the shooting range, and somebody had to shoot, and then there were all these guns you could choose from. And so each person had to choose a gun. And I got like, I mean, I'm probably going to like say the wrong thing. I don't know what it was called. It looked like a rifle. It was like this really, really long thing. And nobody tells you how to do it. I mean, like you actually have to be taught how to shoot a gun. And
For
so I just
sure.
hold the gun like this and I shoot at the thing. And it went like, straight into my shoulder. And I nearly dislocated my shoulder. It was so sore. I couldn't shoot. And I said to them, that's it. I'm not doing it after that. It was dreadful. So yeah, it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, I
No.
don't think I was even anywhere near the target. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but yeah, the shotgun is the one I don't touch. I've had shoulder injuries, and that recoil makes me a little bit anal, which to go and see patients the next day is not so fun.
No, it was hectic. It really, really, really was hectic. Roxy, it's been so awesome chatting to you. Thank you for sharing your story and how you got into the field of vet rehab. And I think it's amazing, working for stables like that. And I can see how to be rewarding. I mean, I grew up horse riding too. And that's like anyone's dream job. Like you're doing like a whole combination of things, riding and it's a competitive yard. And are you still competing yourself?
Not at the moment. I ride a lot of George's young horses. So it's mostly just schooling at home. But just to see them go out to shows, and especially the young horses as they're going up the grades, it's just so amazing to watch because that you've played such a big role in it. So yeah, to be honest, I don't miss the competing side, maybe in a couple of years, but I think time-wise, it's just too hectic. To try and manage what I'm already doing and still get to shows might be a little bit hardcore. So we'll see how it goes.
So I always ask one of these two questions, but I'm going to ask you both of them. So if there's anything that you would go back and change, like is there something that you did that you thought, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that? Or is there anything you would change if you went back and looked at your journey so far?
Honestly, I don't think so. Had you asked me this in 2020, I probably would have had a list. But I think that everything happens for a reason, and it's gotten me to where I am today, which it's all just been part of the process. So although 2020 was hard, I think it was for everyone. I was probably in the best place that I could have been at the time. In any case, at least I was still running the little stable yard in Plate. So I spent my lockdown on Nice and Elephant Park, which was so beautiful. So yeah, I think it was one of those where you just had to trust the process, and it's gotten me to the right place now.
And learned from things, there's always some degree of learning in all the difficulties that we face. There's a lesson.
Sure, yeah.
Not that we like it. We don't like it.
Yeah,
we have to learn
definitely was a lesson in patience. And that I think that was the biggest part.
So my last question for you is, if you have any advice for any of the vet rehabbers that are new and just coming into the field, what advice would you give them?
Sure. I think having a good relationship with the rest of the the veterinary team as a whole. I think the one thing that we maybe need to pay more attention to in South Africa, and maybe it's like this in other places as well, but there's a little bit of an attitude of that everyone wants to be the one person who fixed that animal. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. The physio, the vet, the farrier, we have a lady that does shockwave. I have a chiro that I work with, your saddle fitters, just everyone needs to work as a team. And I think that's really important, is to go out there and find the team that you work well with and keep that relationship good. Because once you start trying to claim that you're the one person who's turned this case around, it's just never true. Everyone has a role to play and it all works together.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, we at Online Pet Health are all for the vet rehab team. I think that all of us working together for the best outcome from the animal. That's what we're here for, right? And like you say, I mean, I think also in the equine world, I think that there are so many more team players. You have so many more people than in the small animal world. Like you say, the saddle fitter, the dentist, there's just so many more people. Yeah, so that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, Roxy. Thank you so much. It's been great chatting. And yeah, you better get to those horses.
Yeah, back out this afternoon to treat a few more. But yeah, thank you so much, Megs. It was great to chat.
Awesome, Roxy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. And please, if you get a moment, head over to Stitcher or iTunes and leave me a review. It's a really lonely job being a podcaster, and so the only time I get to hear from you or know that you're out there is when I get a review. And know that I read every single one of your reviews. So to those of you that have left reviews, I want to say a very, very big thank you. Every time we get a review, it really helps to get the Veterinary Rehabilitation podcast out there to all the vet rehabbers all over the world. All right, vet rehabbers, so if you are looking for more continuing education in the field of veterinary rehabilitation, head over to onlinepethealth.com. Go be awesome, guys.